Should the United States become diplomatic best buddies with the unrecognized African country of Somaliland? US Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland is certainly warming to the idea. In a December article in Politico, he was described as, quote, all in when it comes to US-Somaliland relations. And as Senator Van Hollen is the chairman of the Africa Subcommittee on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, his opinion matters. Here's what he said exactly. My view is that the United States should be more engaged with Somaliland, and what we're looking at is the opening of an office in Somaliland that would include some diplomatic representation, possibly a military liaison. But why would a US senator be so interested in an unrecognized country that most Americans have never heard of, let alone want to start forging diplomatic and possibly military ties? That's what this video is about. I'm going to try and explain why some very important people in Washington are so impressed with Somaliland. But I'm going to go further, actually. I think the American people, not just government officials, should be impressed with Somaliland. And although it might sound unlikely, I'm going to argue that if Americans took the time to learn about the people of this country, they might see a lot of things in them that remind them of themselves. Stay tuned, and I will explain. Hi everybody, I'm Fredo Rockwell, and let's start off by explaining why a major political publication like Politico was asking a US senator about Somaliland in the first place. In November, I published a video about an evening I spent in London with the UK's Somaliland diaspora. I actually spoke at this event. I still can't believe that actually happened. But the guests of honor were Somaliland's Foreign Minister, Dr. Essa Qaid Mahmood, and former Foreign Minister and current Special Envoy, Dr. Edna Adnan Ismail. It was a fantastic night, but what I didn't know is that for these special guests, London was just one stop on a longer itinerary, which also included the United States and Canada. A few days after I saw them, this group arrived in Washington, D.C., where they met with U.S. government agency officials, lawmakers, and various experts from important think tanks. A lot more people than you might think were really interested in meeting the delegation from Somaliland. And a few days after this, in early December, a group of congressional staffers and advisors made a formal visit to Somaliland themselves, where they met with lots of important Somaliland officials, including Somaliland's president, Musa Bihi Abdi. According to that same Politico article, the staffers returned, quote, convinced of Somaliland's value to the US. Now, I know that a lot of people from Somaliland watch my videos. Hi guys. But people from the rest of the world are probably scratching their heads right now and wondering, what is all this about? And if you're American, like me, you're probably extra confused. Why would US senators, their staff, or anyone else in Washington be interested in diplomatic engagement with an unrecognized country? The most obvious reason, and the one I'm going to try and explain briefly in a moment, is geopolitics. But there are actually some very strong reasons why you, yes, you, should be interested in Somaliland as well. And there are some very important actions which you, yes, you, can take, which I think you will want to take. So keep watching. Okay, now it's time for a very, very brief history of Somaliland. Somaliland is here on what is called the Horn of Africa, and it became a British protectorate in the late 19th century. Somaliland was briefly granted independence on the 26th of June 1960, but a few days later, it united with a nearby Italian colony to form the Somali Republic. Within a decade, this united Somalia turned into a brutal dictatorship, and the dictator, Siad Barre, hated an ethnic group known as the Isaaq clan, which is mostly concentrated in the north, in what is now Somaliland. In the late 1980s, he killed an estimated 50 to 100,000 Isaaq people. And he actually launched Somali Air Force planes from the airport in the city of Hargeisa to bomb Hargeisa. So they were taking off from a city's airport to bomb that city. I mean, it's almost unheard of in the history of modern warfare. Barre was overthrown in 1991, and soon afterwards Somalia was engulfed by civil war and collapsed into a failed state. You may know that last part, but what you may not know is that same year, fresh from surviving an attempted genocide, the people living in what had briefly been an independent Somaliland in 1960 decided to reassert their independence. And then they began to rebuild their country. And despite all the odds, in the past 30 years, they've built a peaceful, safe, democratic, and relatively prosperous country. Somaliland's independence has yet to be recognized by any other country, but that independence is real. What currently passes for a national central government in Somalia has zero control over the territory that Somaliland claims. This is an amazing story and its important background, but it is not the reason why Senator Van Hollen and other people in Washington are so interested in Somaliland at the moment. The main reason for that is China.
China.
You see, on July 1st, 2021, the Republic of Somaliland and the Republic of China announced the establishment of formal bilateral ties. And just in case you didn't notice this, that's the Republic of China, not the People's Republic of China, which is the country that most people are talking about when they say the word China. The Republic of China claims to rule all of China, but in actuality, it is the government only of Taiwan. For the past 50 years or so, Taiwan and China have been competing to see which one can get recognized by the most countries as the legitimate government of all of China. And the People's Republic of China has been winning, big time. As I record this video, Taiwan is currently only recognized by 13 members of the United Nations, and most of these are really tiny island countries like Nauru and St. Lucia. And even that small number has been dropping very recently. So the decision by Somaliland to recognize Taiwan was massively embarrassing for the People's Republic of China. And also really surprising. Because you see, since 2013, China has been providing billions and billions of dollars to developing countries across Asia and Africa for infrastructure projects. It's called the Belt and Road Initiative, and it's the foreign policy centerpiece of Chinese leader Xi Jinping. If you're the president of an African country and you want to build a new port or an airport, all you have to do is call up China and ask them for a loan. There'll be at least one national bank that will be willing to give you millions of dollars, maybe two. All you got to do is ask, and of course, recognize the government in Beijing as the legitimate government of all of China. By instead deciding to recognize Taiwan, Somaliland has slammed the door on all of this easy money from China. So was that a smart thing for Somaliland to do? I think so. You see, even if that money from China is used wisely and efficiently to build much needed infrastructure, the money still has to be paid back. And if you can't pay it back, as several countries have learned, you're suddenly in Beijing's pocket. This is known as debt trap diplomacy. And although several experts will tell you that this is a much more complicated situation than it seems at first, there are still some really disturbing case studies. In 2015, the Exim Bank of China lent the Ugandan government $200 million to upgrade its main airport in Entebbe. Uganda has defaulted on that loan, and it was reported in November 2021 that the government would have to surrender the nation's main airport to the Chinese government-controlled bank. This was denied by both Ugandan and Chinese officials. The surrender part, not the problems with the loan part. According to Ugandan MP Joel Senyonyi, who sat on the committee investigating the terms of the loan, Exim Bank has been granted control over the airport's annual budgets and does have the right to, quote, grab the airport in case of default. Tiny Djibouti, a country built around an enormous and very strategically important port, borrowed over $492 million from Exim Bank in 2013 to build a new railway to landlocked Ethiopia, the main market for Djibouti's port services. The new railway has been completed, but it's not generating enough profit to pay off the loan. And high-level Djiboutian officials now have to travel to China, cap in hand, to ask for concessions and loan restructuring. Here's a photo of this happening in 2019. Meanwhile, and by total coincidence, of course, China has decided to open its first overseas military base in Djibouti. And in fact, that base has recently been expanded, so it can now accommodate aircraft carriers. Along with drones, aircraft carriers are one of the main ways that militaries are able to exert force on the other side of the world. So Chinese aircraft carriers coming to Djibouti would be pretty alarming. Djibouti sits right at the entrance, a very narrow entrance, by the way, to the Red Sea. This is the same key shipping lane that was disrupted when the Ever Given got bogged down in the Suez Canal on the other end of the Red Sea in March 2021. That blocked $9 billion in trade per day. You guys remember how crazy that was? I'm generally pretty skeptical about claims made by the US military, but I gotta admit, a major Chinese military base in a strategically located country, a country which is deeply in debt to the Chinese government, that's not something you can brush off as just hype. And you see, this is one major reason why Somaliland could make such a good potential ally for the United States. Somaliland is right next to Djibouti, and it has over 500 miles of coastline running along the Gulf of Aden. It's on that main shipping line and right across from the Arabian Peninsula, not very far away from the Persian Gulf. This is a country that the People's Republic of China would love to have leverage over, but they've been shut out. Meanwhile, Somaliland has still managed to attract significant amounts of investment from other countries. From Taiwan, of course, who their pockets aren't as deep as the People's Republic of China, but they have been investing in Somaliland's technology capabilities, and they're also funding a project which could lead to the establishment of a major oil industry in Somaliland. And then there's Dubai, who have invested $442 million into upgrading Somaliland's main port at Berbera. The port at Berbera has also had investment from Ethiopia, and a new container terminal was opened in July 2021. So it looks like Djibouti's port services now have some major competition. But was turning down all that easy money from China the right decision for Somaliland? Well, it's given Somaliland a lot of credibility in Washington, where a lot of officials for a very long time have been very worried about China's increasing inroads and increasing control over multiple African governments. According to Senator Van Hollen, Somaliland's refusal to engage with Beijing has created, quote, an opportunity to expand US diplomatic presence in the region. But according to Somaliland's Foreign Minister, Dr. Essa Qaid, Somaliland didn't choose Taiwan just to win favor with the US. As he explained, we have values and democracy and respect for human rights, and we want to run our government the way we want. So we prefer to have Taiwan rather than China, which is a dictatorship. Democracy? Human rights? In the Horn of Africa? Isn't that a region full of dictatorships and civil wars? Sadly, yes, except for Somaliland. And this is the other reason why I think Somaliland could be such a potentially valuable ally for America. It is a democracy which has been running successful, one-person, one-vote elections where political parties have peaceful transfers of power afterwards for over 20 years. I've made 2 previous videos about Somaliland's democratic institutions, and if you're interested, I'd highly recommend that you check them both out. Somaliland is not perfect. I don't think anyone is trying to argue that it is. But the democracy is real, and it's growing more entrenched over time. And to be honest, the more I learn about Somaliland, and the more I listen to the people of Somaliland talk about their country, the more it all sounds kind of familiar. And so this is the other topic I wanted to discuss on this video, and I think it goes a long way to explain why I find the story of Somaliland so compelling. You see, I think the people of Somaliland and America have a lot in common. Culturally, I mean. And I know that sounds weird to hear, because if you put them side by side, American culture and Somaliland culture don't look at all similar. But bear with me. Remember how I said the people of Somaliland re-established their country in 1991 following the Isaaq genocide and the collapse of Somalia? This took place at a conference in Barrow, where over many days traditional leaders from across the country met, talked, and eventually reached a consensus. And then they signed a Declaration of Independence. And then, against the odds and against all expectations, the people of Somaliland began rebuilding their country. A country with a new and unique form of government. A nationwide referendum on a new constitution was held in 2001. And since then, there have been 3 successful nationwide local elections, 3 successful presidential elections, and 2 successful parliamentary elections, the most recent of which occurred last May. And I can't help but see America's history reflected in what Somaliland has accomplished. Somaliland is a country with founding fathers who forged a unique form of government, not one which was handed to them by colonial civil servants. and it didn't get any help from foreign powers with much of anything. And for decades, it was largely ignored by pretty much everybody. This is a country which created itself from scratch in a time of great need. Or to paraphrase an American president, Somaliland was created of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I can't help but identify with that. But honestly, the thing about Somaliland that reminds me most of America is when I talk to the people of Somaliland about their country. So I know to British people and Europeans and much of the rest of the world, American patriotism seems kind of weird. We have this way of talking very vocally and upfront about our country, our ideals, and our values, even when we fall short of those ideals and values, which we do. And if you spend more than 5 minutes with anyone from Somaliland, they will likely tell you about the values and ideals of their country in a way which, to me, sounds downright American. And by the way, just to avoid confusion, I mean that as a compliment. If you have any doubts about this, just check out the comments sections on any of the previous videos I've done about Somaliland. When the people of Somaliland leave comments on my videos, the pride in their country is just evident in every single one. And unless you're watching this video right after I published it, there's a decent chance, I think, that there'll be similar comments in this video. So earlier in the video, I said there was something important that you, the viewers, those of you not from Somaliland, could do. There are actually 3 things. Here they are. First of all, learn more about Somaliland. I've made other videos, but there are many other really good sources out there. Read, watch, listen. I promise you, it is interesting. Secondly, if you agree with me that Somaliland is important, not just as a strategically important ally in Africa, but as a bastion of democracy in a part of the world that badly needs more democracy, email your congressman, your senator, your member of parliament, and tell them. They will know what you're talking about. Somaliland is well known in the corridors of power around the world, but what they're not used to is hearing about it from members of the general public. If they start getting emails and letters from the general public supporting Somaliland, they will notice. And if you feel strongly enough about it, as I do, also tell them that Somaliland deserves to have full diplomatic recognition. Somaliland deserves this, and it's the right thing to do. The third thing I would recommend you doing is tell the people of Somaliland about your support. Put it on Twitter, Facebook, wherever. I'll leave some accounts you might want to tag in the description, but honestly, just use the hashtag Somaliland or just the word Somaliland, and I promise you, people from Somaliland will notice that. There is a reason why this last step is so important. Somaliland's democratic and civil institutions have come a long way in the last 30 years, and the world has mostly ignored this. That's wrong. This needs to be celebrated. Things are not perfect. I sometimes read about journalists being detained or other things that sound somewhat worrying, but overall, this is an amazing story full of good news, and one which deserves to be acknowledged and told more widely. Let me leave you with one story from Somaliland history that you should know. In 2003, the winner of Somaliland's first democratic presidential election won by just 80 votes. 80. That's less than 0.1% of the total. As you can imagine, that was pretty upsetting for the supporters of the candidate who came in second. Ahmed Mohamed Mahmoud, known as Solanyo. But Solanyo accepted the result, conceded defeat to his opponent, and at the next election in 2010, he won by 88,000 votes. By conceding an election that he lost by just 80 votes, President Solanyo put the needs of Somaliland above his own personal interest. That's true leadership, and something which, as an American, I have to admire. Wherever you are from, and whatever politics you support, I hope that you admire it too. Thanks for watching. I'll be making more videos about Somaliland, other countries in the Horn of Africa, and of course the rest of the world. So if you're interested, subscribe just to make sure you don't miss any. And I'll see you guys in the next video.